All right, my next guest is the Vice President of Research at the Government Accountability Institute and the author of Fraud, How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election. He's also the co-host of the Drill Down with Peter Schweitzer podcast. Happy to have Eric Ayers back with us. Eric, we're going to focus in on something that you guys have been covering on your podcast. President Trump's State Department was prompted by Breitbart's coverage of your and Peter's invisible coup to probe Mexican consulates in the U.S. Tell us what you guys found and what the administration is doing.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking, Eric, and thank you for bringing this up because I think it's an important story and it's underreported. What was reported in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago is that the State Department has opened a probe and looking into the activities of the Mexican consulates here in the United States. You know, the United States has 9 consulates in Mexico. Mexico has 53 in the United States, Eric, right? I mean, countries that we're very close with, like London and China, have like 6 and maybe 7 respectively. So the fact that Mexico has 53 is quite alarming. And I think what happened is the Department of Justice officials indicted the governor of the state of Sinaloa in Mexico under suspicion of, if you can believe it, working with the Sinaloa cartel. And so what they said is like, hey, President Sheinbaum, we'd like some cooperation on this. And so far she has declined. So what they have done is the next like arrow in the quiver to try to apply some diplomatic pressure is they said, okay, fine, we're going to begin an investigation into what exactly you're up to with these consulates. It's been reported in the New York Times, and there's actually a fawning piece in the Associated Press actually last week talking about how helpful these consulates are to Mexican Americans, including the estimated 1.7 million illegal immigrants that are in California alone of Mexican descent, and how helpful they can be to those people. But what we're finding is that, listen, in their own words, Mexican officials have said that they're encouraging people to kind of reconquest the area in the Southwest, reconquest California, claim this land back. So I think it's well time for American officials, Department of Justice officials, to take a look and believe Mexican officials at their own word when they say what they're up to, because our evidence suggests it's not advancing the interests of the Trump administration. You know,
Eric, you do some Google searching. You ask how many Mexicans live in the United States, and it comes somewhere around 30 to 35 million. And then you ask how many of them live here legally, and the number is under 10 million. It's really dramatic. So here's the question, and you ask the proper question: what goes on in these consulates? Folks, we need to understand there are embassies where it's pretty official, and then there are consulates where it can be a lot less official. Tell us what do you, I'm not saying accusing them of, but what do you think you know or you've heard that could be linked to these consulates?
Well, there was a meeting in Oklahoma City, and this is in Peter's book, and so this is, you know, it's not a secret, but there was a meeting that was held with Mexican consulate officials and members of the Democrat Party in which they had basically a political meeting. They said, okay, let's strategize. How can we try to stop Donald Trump from winning this election? How can we stop Republicans from winning? And the biggest issue, of course, they disagree with on is immigration policy. So obviously Democrats, Joe Biden, had an immigration policy that Mexican officials were big fans of, the open border. You heard James Talrico say he thinks the southern border should have a welcome mat on it. Mexico likes that because they like the idea of having access to not just the territory that they believe was stolen from them 100 years ago, but also they like having access to the American economy and the amount of money that comes here that gets then sent back to Mexico, right? Money transfers are a huge part of the Mexican economy.
It's literally not an ability, if it's done, I guess, nefariously, to create policy within the country that you're occupying through these consulates without the home country knowing what you're up to. My question here, a very important question. So we have Oscar Ramirez on the show quite a bit. He's on our board, on the border, on the Mexican side of the border. He lives in Mexico, Mexican side of the border, reports for Real America's Voice. He's constantly being harassed by cartel and whatnot. They're finding, mass grave sites. And I keep asking Oscar this, and I don't want him to get in trouble for pushing this link. But look, we took Maduro. We went in and took Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela for what Trump saw as war crimes, right? Sending drugs over to America. Far more drugs come into America from Mexico than Venezuela. Why are we playing nice with Claudia Sheinbaum?
You probably know more about this than I do, Eric, but I would say we have a far greater business relationship with the country of Mexico than we did with Venezuela. And so I think, there's a lot more international commerce there.
Isn't that scary, though, Eric? Isn't that scary that we're going to look the other way on literally hundreds of billions of dollars worth of drugs that are killing our kids, our families coming across the border because we're buying oil from Mexico, essentially?
Well, hang on. It's not just that, right? I mean, who are the two countries that are most linked to the drug cartel trade that come to the United States? It's Mexico and China. I mean, that was one of the big revelations from other books that we've done with Peter Schweitzer is they're using Chinese equipment. They're using Chinese bank accounts. They're using Chinese chemicals, the precursor to make the fentanyl that makes its way into this country. So there's very much a business relationship between Mexico and Chinese officials as the partner with this drug trade. That's actually another one of the things that, so it's like, it's not bilateral, it's multilateral. It's a very complicated level of negotiations. President Trump just had the summit with Xi not too long ago, but absolutely. So I think you're right to see them try to put more pressure on Mexico. But I think that's literally what these investigations into these Mexican consulates represent. They represent the next step in attempting to apply this pressure, which is why they're even threatening to say, listen, we may close some of these. For Mexico to have 53 consulates, including a consulate in every state, like does Alaska need a Mexican consulate? I'm not sure, but they have one. And so I think it's the next pressure point that the Trump administration is threatening to use if they don't get more cooperation from President Sheinbaum on the drug war, among other issues. Do
these people who are occupying these consulates, working at these consulates, do they have some sort of immunity like embassy workers do in the United States?
I don't know that they have immunity in the United States from political or from prosecution, but here's what's crazy is in Mexico. So we indicted the guy that's the president of the Sinaloa state, right? Because under suspicions that he was working with the Sinaloa cartel. And President Sheinbaum literally said, well, we'd like to see some evidence because so far the only evidence that's been represented are a list of witnesses that nobody knows. As if the United States would say, hey, here are the people who say this guy's in bed with the drug cartels. Those people would be disappeared with the quickness. So of course they're keeping the identities from those people secret. But what's even more scandalous is they have immunity not just within the Mexican government, but within the Mexican, I think, legislature. So there's two different layers of political immunity they have in Mexico that would have to be released for those people to be charged by a crime in Mexico. So they're heavily protected there. It's unclear if they have the same level of protection on this side of the border. But what is clear is there's a devastating impact of the drugs that are flowing into this country from Mexico. And, the Biden administration looked the other way on this for so long. The Trump administration's beginning to apply pressure and hopefully starting to see it make a difference.
Unfortunately, it doesn't matter what administration it is, Eric. I mean, I've been doing this since maybe the end of Bushy presidency. It doesn't matter. What we stop is a drop in the bucket to the amount of drugs that are coming across our border. They'll tell you, the border agents will tell you, yeah, we get about 2%. That's it, 2%. Doesn't matter if it's Trump, Biden, or anyone else. Yeah, maybe the actual physical people coming across may have slowed down, maybe even have stopped, but the drugs are flowing right underneath. They find a tunnel, there's 1,000 more. For every tunnel they find, there's at least several hundred more. It's a sad, sad reality we're living with.
Well, and Eric, you know this too. When they seize more drugs, it doesn't mean they're being more successful. It just means there's more drugs coming in, right? Because it's just a percentage of a greater volume.
It's just a percentage. Just this. That's the way the math works. Eric Eggers, appreciate your time. Co-host of the Drill Down podcast with Peter Schweitzer. Good to have you back, and we'll get you back. I want to talk a little China in the Middle East. I know you guys are all over China, and you are as well over China and what's going on with Iran and China, the oil trade specifically. Eric, good to have you, brother.
Anytime, Eric. Thank you.